This is the incredible story about how FinTech companies facilitated billions of dollars of fraud in the PPP program, including internal documents from company employees, messages between gang members, and more. If you took PPP funding for yourself or your business, or you're a U.S. taxpayer, you're going to want to watch this. There is without a doubt going to be a Netflix documentary about what I'm about to tell you. This is the untold story of the PPP program and how a few main companies allowed thousands of fraudsters to claim billions of dollars, and it's likely a lot of them will never be brought to justice. Be sure to watch until the end. As always, thanks for supporting our channel, and if you're new, consider subscribing. If you think this is worth sharing, hit the like button, and feel free to chime in the comments about your take on what's happened here. This all came out as a result of a new 150-page report published by Congress detailing explicitly what happened between a couple firms, in particular Womply, Blueacorn, Cabbage to a lesser extent. It includes owners who made off with millions of dollars, company owners ignoring requests of law enforcement, and correspondence between gang members. But before we get here, we need to start at the beginning. The Paycheck Protection Program was approved as part of the CARES Act back in 2020 when the pandemic was just beginning, as a way to help the millions of small business owners across the country retain employees and prevent, in theory, economic collapse. The statute was approved in the CARES Act, and then it was up to the SBA to set the ground rules with coordination from the then Trump administration. At that time, there was some criticism that this could be the biggest fraud in the history of our country because there was little original oversight that took place. This report explicitly shows that tens of billions of dollars in PPP funds were likely dispersed to ineligible or fraudulent applicants, despite FinTech's claims that their use of technology and innovation would allow them to better administer the PPP program than traditional financial institutions. Many of these companies appear to have failed to stop obvious and preventable fraud. Keywords there. A lot of this just appears to be gross negligence, and this has led to the needless loss of taxpayer dollars. This right here could be thousands of dollars of your hard-earned money that you sent to the government that got into the hands of fraudsters, criminals, and owners of these companies. In particular, two unvetted and unregulated FinTech companies facilitated nearly 1 in every 3 PPP loans funded in 2021. 1 out of 3, Womply and Blueacorn, and these two companies failed to implement systems capable of consistently detecting and preventing fraudulent and otherwise ineligible PPP applications. Blueacorn reviewed over 1.7 million loans, but only had 1 direct employee who assisted with processing these PPP loan applications. The firm Blueacorn hired to review PPP loan applications were friends of the Blueacorn owners. Elevate Advisors was basically a couple hired by Blueacorn, who then hired 30 of the owner's closest friends and family to work as underwriters. Elevate Advisors was a small Arizona-based payment consultancy owned by husband and wife entrepreneurs Adam and Kristen Spencer. Ms. Spencer had no prior experience leading or performing fraud prevention or underwriting services for multi-billion-dollar federal programs. In one message to a Blueacorn consultant, Ms. Spencer said, "I was doing a million jobs. I was the fraud team, plus in charge of the processing underwriting team." Elevate Advisors hired its co-owners, inexperienced friends and relatives, including the couple's parents, siblings, and children, to review and underwrite PPP applications in connection with its fraud prevention contract with Blueacorn. In a text message, Kristen Spencer said this: "We are doing this for the people we hired to make money, our friends and family. That is where the money is going, and it will be life-changing money for anyone who does it." Loads of messages by text and on Slack that pointed to the greed at play here, that they were only focused on making money. And here's how much money the owners of Blueacorn took: nearly $300 million. And they didn't care about fraudsters trying to take advantage of the system. In fact, they just wanted to push people through so they could get their cut. Here's one quote from a Blueacorn employee: "When I complained to my superiors that I was uncomfortable identifying potential fraud and submitting PPP loans to the SBA at this rate without proper training, I was told on multiple occasions by Blueacorn leadership that, quote, 'We are not the fraud police. Even if the applicants are submitting fraudulent documents, we are covered by the applicant's attestation that what they are submitting is truthful, and even fraud will help stimulate the economy. Imagine that. They said even fraud will help stimulate the economy. According to the reviewer, Blueacorn Management said this: "We want you to submit. The more you submit, the more we get paid." I mean, certainly there are going to be charges related to this. I'll get into that in a second. And then Stephanie Hockridge, who's one of the owners of Blueacorn, in a few Slack messages, she said this: "Another fire. I have a $1.9 million deal that's been sitting in UW, that's underwriting, for 5 days. I don't need to tell you how much Blueacorn makes off that loan alone." She goes on to complain, "I just can't believe it's taken 5 days to get to this loan. Like, what are you doing, Jack?" And finally, when talking about smaller loans that they wouldn't get as much money from, she said, "FQWK, which was the smaller loan segment, delete them. Who effing cares? We're not the first bank to decline borrowers who deserve to be funded. They go elsewhere." All of the Blueacorn owners also applied for and received PPP loans in excess of $200,000. That's on the Blueacorn front, but Womply is just as bad, if not worse. You saw their ads everywhere pushing people to apply for PPP, even if you were just one person, according to their advertising, and their fraud screenings failed to prevent, quote, rampant fraud, and were accompanied by questionable business practices despite generating over $1 billion in profits. Womply partners all witnessed this. Here's one quote: "There were always problems with their system. It was kind of put together with duct tape and gum." And finally, the banks that Womply partnered with were also very upset. Here's a quote from an email correspondence: "Over the last several days, it has become clear that the services promised by Womply have not only not been provided, but have placed our company in a very bad predicament due to the high likelihood of fraud involved in many of the referred loans from your company." And then the SBA Inspector General got involved to try to investigate some of this fraud and was stonewalled by Womply, going up to the CEO level. Here's an email to Toby Scammell, the CEO of Womply, who, by the way, had already been convicted of insider trading back in 2014. Well, Toby Scammell got this email basically saying, "See email below. What is going on here? This is unacceptable. We have dozens of both active fraud cases that need to either be referred to the Inspector General or the Department of Justice, or cleared so that the borrower loans can be forgiven." Womply refused to provide this information for proper investigation. And the long of the short is, criminals found out about how easy it was to get this money. These were the paths of least resistance for criminal gangs and fraudsters across the US. Here's one of the gang member threads: You ain't got nobody who wants to run their stuff on Womply. What the F is Womply? Man, that's a website that's really hitting. I don't know what the F that is. That's the PPP loan. Another thread: I need one of y'all to teach me Womply all day, way through. Also to show me Blueacorn. Cabbage is also brought up in this long document. Cabbage was aware of the fraud, but had little incentive to prevent it. Similar sentiment as before in response to an analyst's question about multiple applications coming from a single device. A Cabbage risk manager said this, quote, "The risk is not ours, it is SBA's." Again, pointing the finger to the SBA, saying like, hey, we're just the middleman. We don't take responsibility here. That was the big mistake. Basically, these companies getting billions of dollars in taxpayer money and abdicating responsibility, putting it on the SBA. Meanwhile, in October 2020, Cabbage sold the majority of its assets to American Express for approximately $850 million. All in all, this is billions of dollars in taxpayer money that was sent to fraud, with FinTech companies enabling this to happen. There were several major recommendations after this report, including investigations and potential criminal charges by the Department of Justice. Here are two of them specifically. The SBA OIG should investigate suspicious loans to FinTech executives, their families, and associates, as identified in this select subcommittee's report, specifically calling out Blueacorn and Elevate advisors may have committed PPP fraud themselves while working on the eligibility verification and anti-fraud aspects of the program. Plus, the Department of Justice should continue to aggressively prosecute PPP fraud with an increased focus on fraud committed by individuals in positions of trust and authority related to this program, such as lenders, LSPs, and other agents. And finally, Congress should continue to fund and support community lenders, CDFIs, CDIs, MDIs, so that these institutions can increase their capacity to directly serve underserved communities and small businesses. Again, that's the point of this program to begin with. Not free money for anyone, but money especially for entrepreneurs and business owners traditionally underserved or who can't get financial resources elsewhere. So that's the important point to leave you with. It's a bombshell of a report. We're going to leave the link to it in the description. Would love to hear what you think about this in the comments, whether you're a PPP borrower or just a US taxpayer. Now that it's come to light, the extent of this involvement between Womply, Blueacorn, the owners of those companies, and what their messages show, and how gangs and fraudsters took advantage of the lack of oversight here. What do you think should happen to the owners of those companies? Chime in. Most importantly, thanks so much for tuning in and subscribing. Would love to know what you think about this. As always, if you are a small business owner, check out the link right here to get one-on-one help from our team. Be sure to hit subscribe and go download our app, HelloSkip, in the App Stores and Google Play. Most importantly, stay well, stay healthy, and I'll see you in the next video.